so that if anyone wants to go back and review it, they can. So I'll just get that started now and just recap really what we're going to go over this afternoon. So hopefully this session should take sort of 45 minutes, an hour, but we might have a little bit longer for questions at the end if needed. It might be that we speed through it really, really quickly because it is kind of a recap of some of the things that we've spoken about already. Hey, Selvin, he's there, he's with us. Amazing. So obviously, I'm going to just do a little bit of a quick recap about what QTLS is, and then I'm going to talk about some of the resources that are available to you now. Obviously, your workbooks haven't become live yet, but there are things that you can go on and have a look at and read before your workbook becomes live. There are a few things that we can do now to get ready for QTLS, and then I'll talk about some of the next steps that you'll want to make sure you're doing so that you're ready. So first thing then is, what is QTLS? You've seen this video before, so don't panic. I'm not going to make you watch it, but it's on the slides there in the resources, which will be available on Canvas. So if you want to go back over and recap that, that's fine. But really, we're looking at a course that isn't a qualification. You've done your qualification, but a status. So this is the phase of the program where you'll be achieving your QTLS status, your Qualified Teacher Learning and Skills status. So this is where you go through a process where you're looking at developing after your qualification. So you'll be required to complete an online workbook, and I've talked quite a bit about having an online workbook. And in that workbook, you'll be putting together almost like a portfolio of evidence that demonstrates the skills and knowledge that you've gained post-qualification. So you're almost kind of giving evidence that you're a reflective practitioner and that you can look at your practice and decide on what development activities you need to undertake and then prove that you can do that in an effective manner. Okay. Now, the process takes 6 months. You're all aware that by the 31st of March, you'll submit your workbooks. They are submitted to SET, who usually release marks and grades in May. So you'll either get confirmation you have passed or you haven't, and this is what needs to be done. Okay, so by May next year, most of us will be celebrating that you've all finished and done. Okay, there's a few reminders there about obviously what needs to be included, but you've all completed the eligibility checker, you've all registered, and we've received your invoices and they have been paid. So you should now be waiting for, if not already received, an email from SET. And usually, and in the past, your workbooks become live on the 1st of October. Obviously, each year changes slightly, some of the dates change slightly. So some of the guidance I'm giving you now is based on last year's kind of information. When the workbooks become live, then I'll have a bit more information about the exact dates, okay? But don't panic. Once we get there, there's plenty of time. So what resources are available to you now prior to your workbooks becoming available? So at the moment, you've all got SET membership, and you'll all have a SET dashboard. So when you go on to your membership area where you put in your passwords, you'll be able to access lots and lots of information. Here you'll be able to look at different resources before your workbook's issued. And I really encourage you to familiarise yourself with the process, but also the professional standards. You will be using the professional standards quite heavily during this period of time, and therefore it's really important that you've got a good understanding of what they are. So I really recommend their research tool, and I can put the link on the chat for you. This is like a digital kind of interactive tool where you can click on the different standards, and each one has different information related to that standard. So you might find, an article or a bit of research that's related to that particular standard. And so it starts to give you an overview of what they mean by each professional standard. So I'll just pop that link on the room chat. There will be quite a few links today. SET also recommend anyone undertaking QTLS reads the report, What Makes Great Teaching? Okay, it's written by Durham University, and this is a report that looks at over, I think it's 200 pieces of research that looks at the different elements of teaching that's been identified as having the strongest impact in like learners' attainment. Okay, so it's really probably quite useful to look at that to start to give you ideas about where you might want to go when you're developing your own practice. If there's evidence out there that suggests that changing a particular activity or embedding a particular activity has good evidence that it improves attainment, then it might be worth looking into. So that's a really good point, a place to start. But also set have a massive library of webinars and reading material, and you will be expected to undertake CPD during this process. So what you want to do is relate the CPD to the professional standards. And of course, the library and webinars and the research tool will help you do that. Okay. You may have already, I don't know, received your quarterly journal that comes from SET. Obviously, that's really interesting because it kind of it's a bit like a magazine that gives you information about the latest research and news in the education sector that we're looking at, so in further education, but it does give us a really good overview of what's going on in our particular area. Obviously, the Education and Training Foundation also give guidance to practitioners at different stages in their career. So you might want to look at their website where they talk about the professional standards in relation to your career stage. So for you guys, you would be in your early career stage, and it's really quite a useful tool to decide, okay, what should I be doing at this stage in my career against this professional standard? Because there are some people who will be using the professional standards to look at their practice, but they've been practitioners for 20 years or more. And so you need to decide, okay, well, what would my practice look like at this particular stage in my career? So that's a really useful link to look at as well. Okay, any questions about resources? Good. Okay. So your mentors will also have some questions, I'm sure, and some of your schools I know have already asked questions. I've replied to a few people who've had some questions from schools and things. So SET do issue some guidance with regards to what's required for your supporters, and there's a couple of links on there which obviously will be available to you. But the Education and Training Foundation also offer coaching and mentor programs. So if your mentor wants to undergo some CPD of their own, they can also enrol in some of their programs to develop their practice. And it might be something that you'd be interested in later on in your careers as well. So obviously that might be something you want to look at. Now I've put on the right at the bottom of this slide, mainly to remind you that you must maintain your SET membership. Okay, it's a requirement for you to continue to hold QTLS status, and therefore, if you lapse your payment and you don't make and you can't, cancel or whatever, then that means that employers can't check you. Your QTLS status will no longer be on their register, so your QTLS will be inactive, basically. So you must keep that maintained. Okay. So let's have a look at how we can prepare for QTLS. So there's a few things that we can do already, and you've done some of those. So these are generally this kind of sections that you have on your online workbook. So in each section, you'll be required to upload supporting evidence. So things like notes from meetings, you might put assessment plans, it could be all sorts of different types of evidence, attendance data. In addition to that, you'll be asked to complete some narratives, usually to describe the evidence that you've submitted. And in those cases, you'll often be given a word count so you know exactly how much to write about. And it's really often not very much. We've kind of already done the introduction about you part. This is where you're going to provide information about yourself and your qualifications and your background. You'll put the details of your supporter in there, and obviously you'll upload your certificates. So everything that you've put on Canvas so far, you will need to submit to that workbook too. Okay. It feels like duplicating work, uploading it to Canvas as well. But obviously I can't see your workbooks. So in order for me to check everything's there and correct, we will ask you to submit some stuff to Canvas as well as your workbook. Okay. So, a few top tips from SAT, and I think probably the first one is the most important for me in the sense that don't wait till the last minute to complete your portfolio. You could leave it to the last minute, but it's pretty evident when you do. And what we don't want is the reviewer to pick it up and feel that that's happened. So I would recommend you break it down into small chunks. So obviously coming to these drop-in sessions helps you do that, but also think of it as a kind of a work in progress. In other words, just because you've made one decision doesn't mean that you can't go back and change something. So you can kind of develop it as we go. Obviously, you need to ensure that everything you put in there is related to your post 14 practice. Okay, I know some of you are teaching in different settings at the same time. SEP do not want to know about that. Okay. Any questions about that so far? Go for it. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah. So everything that you are responsible for would be good to include. We're going to talk about that right now, actually, Rebecca. So that leads me on really nicely. Thank you. So we're actually going to this evening have a go at completing the roles and responsibilities section. So that means when your workbook becomes live, you will be in a position to get everything uploaded and ready for the checkpoint well in advance. Okay, so in this section, and this was obviously going on last year, they asked for three things to be completed. They want your narrative to describe your teaching career to date, a narrative to describe your current roles and responsibilities, and I know we had a little look at this in Module 6, and then a very brief description of why you're undertaking QTLS, your motivations basically. So part of this section will ask for evidence to be submitted, and that's your teaching timetable, teaching log, and CV. And we'll talk about those in your homework as well a bit later. But what I will just remind you is that your CV must be really clear and the 14 plus teaching really evident. Okay. And it needs to be evident that you are the main lead on that teaching, you're not supporting, that you're responsible for the delivering and assessing of that teaching as well. So, really, we almost want to have the reviewer pick up your workbook and it be kind of foolproof. All right. So, if you need to update your CVs because you haven't, and I know I haven't for a very long time, then make sure you do that as well. Selvin, go for it. You can upload that as additional evidence. It's not a requirement at the moment until the workbooks become live. As far as I'm aware, the requirement is you just give a brief narrative. So it's just your description. Yeah. But if you have something like that, then that's absolutely fine as well. You can put it as additional evidence. So go for it. Yes, please. Yeah. So in your teaching career to date, you can talk about teaching prior to your adult teaching, and obviously, yes, then you can talk about your primary teaching as well. That part I really would keep brief, and you don't have very much word count at all for that, so you really won't be able to put very much in there anyway. All right, that's kind of they just kind of want to know your background, really. No worries. So we're actually going to have a go at task 2 in that section. So that is about your current roles and responsibilities. That is what they are interested in. Okay, so again, you can see it's only 150 to 200 words, and there are 4 points that you need to cover. So I know some of you might have had a go at this when we were talking about it in Module 6, but I'd like you to have a go now. So you might be able to find what you did before, or you might want to start afresh. But what I am going to do is give you a template. So you'll have to download this template because you won't be able to write directly on it. But this kind of will section each question. So question 1, question 2, and question 3. And it's question 2 that I want you to focus on. And that is where you're talking about your current practice. So here you just need to tell me the age range of your learners. So it might be that you have, I don't know, year 11s and perhaps some sixth formers, etc. Um, the types of learners that you have. So, do you have learners with additional needs? Are you a single sex school, etc.? The subjects that you teach, and obviously these subjects need to be the ones that you have your level 3 qualification for. So, whatever certificate you uploaded in Canvas for, I think it was Appendix D, I believe, that's the subjects that you need to be stating. Any other subjects in there, I would then want to go and see if you had a qualification for that. So just be really clear. And then obviously the final thing is about working with colleagues to improve quality of teaching and learning. So what is it that you currently do with colleagues looking at your teaching and learning practices? Okay. If you get all that finished, I'm probably going to give you about 10 minutes. We might not need that long. If you get that finished, have a go at question 3. This is just your motivations. Why are you undertaking QTLS? And if you get that done, then you can have a go at question 1 as well. It's all on that one template. And this will then just form all of your roles and responsibilities section of your workbook. Has anyone got any questions? Paris, go for it. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. So yep, no, that's fine. So, what I want you to do there then is detail the sorts of responsibilities you would have when you are responsible for that class. So, what are your expectations for curriculum design? What are the expectations for lesson planning and delivery? What are the expectations for assessment? Etc. So, what groups would you be having and responsible for? So, when I pick this up and read it, I will know exactly what you'll be responsible for at that period of time when you start. Okay. So, writing something like that is absolutely fine. How about Paris? You have a go at questions 1 and 3 for now, and perhaps we could link up at another time to have a go at question 2 when you've got a bit more detail. No problems. Anyone else? Yeah. That's a really good one. Now, on their website, they actually say that it should be sixth form and above, which is much older than 14. So, yes, you can include year 9 because they are 14. But in addition to that, I'd expect there to be some year 10s and 11s as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Perfect. So, just make that really clear. In each class, I have a mixed range of learners from the ages of 14 to 18. That, that's absolutely fine. Anyone else? Brilliant. Okay. Well, what we'll do then is we'll probably give it until about 25 past, and then we'll check in on people and see if we're all okay to move on. Cool, you get. Okay. So, obviously, you can state that you work in a traditionally all boys school. So, your um, admissions policy, I believe, would probably state something along those lines. And then obviously, they're not going to question that. They just want to get an idea, a feel for what you do and what you. No, that's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry, be as politically correct as you can be. That's all right. So I've just put a link on the chat there to a document, a template document, which has 3 questions on it. I'm just asking you to have a look at question 2 for now. And that's just writing about your current roles and responsibilities for the practice that you're undertaking with post 14 learners. So, in general, 150, 200 words roughly. Tell me about those learners, the types of learners you have, their age ranges, the subjects that you're teaching those learners, and how you also work with colleagues to improve the quality of teaching and learning in your setting. So it might be at the moment you just write a few bullet points down, you just jot a few ideas, but they want to get a feel for the fact that you are the main lead of that particular group or cohort, and that you're not just supporting teaching and learning in that area, and that you are responsible for the planning and delivery of this program or the lessons, and that you work alongside others should you have a subject team or whatever, and how you work alongside those people when you deliver your program. Yeah, yeah, because you'll be responsible for them. Yeah, absolutely, and overseeing their workload, and getting feedback and to and from them. So yeah, absolutely, that would be part of your responsibility. Yes. So within that tutor group, what you need to be careful about is suggesting that you're teaching any lessons you don't have a level 3 qualification in. So yes, you can say you're responsible for that group, and maybe you provide pastoral care for them. Um, and obviously there's an attendance responsibility as well. But yeah, just be careful if you're undertaking any PHSE that you have the relevant qualifications to be able to do that. So sometimes it's best if you don't to leave that. No, I'm sure it'll be fine. It's just making it clear what you're responsible for within those tutor time, within that tutor time. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Good question. Thank you, Selvin. That's going to be useful to a lot of people. So question 2, it's at 150 to 200. That was the requirement last year. So I'm going to go on the basis that that's what they're going to ask you to do this year. If you're slightly over or slightly under on any of the questions, it's a bit like when you did your debt. It's not a fail because you've got less words. It's just a guidance, so you can kind of get an idea of how much you should write. No worries. Yes. Yeah, but that could be potentially part of their behavioural procedure. Is that any? Yeah, no. Yeah, they'll have a behaviour policy that they will have to follow. It might be that you just need to do a bit more digging. It might be that that teacher, although they've sent them out, they are still responsible for reporting the fact that they were asked to leave the building, or there was some repercussion. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, so I would probably ask your team about the processes after that's happened. What's the follow up? How does that get recorded? Because there will be a situation where they have to do that, and obviously because at the end of the day, they can actually remove students from a program when you get into that age. Yeah. Yeah, so there will be a procedure for that because obviously there'll be an appeals process, etc. So have a look. Yeah, have a look into that. That's all right. Okay, anyone? Go for it. Yes. Good question. It's five. So, yeah, five is your minimum group teaching. So, what they actually state is that your minimum of 4 hours per week has to be that five or more group session. So, if you're doing one to one, that's fine. Or if you're doing less than that, that's fine. But that's in addition to your minimum hours. Yeah, good question, Jennifer. Okay. Anyone kind of want to hold off? Got any questions before we kind of move on? Obviously, I'm aware that you probably want to get on with your evenings, so I don't want to kind of keep you too much longer. Looks like everyone's kind of happy. Okay, so I'm going to recommend that you obviously tidy that up a bit, try and have a go at questions one and three if you haven't already, because this will form part of your homework. All right, so I will be asking you to upload this to Canvas, and the reason I want to see this is because I need to check that what you've written on here matches what you submitted previously on your About You section, that your qualifications match what you've written, etc., etc. I will ask you to complete a teaching timetable, but there's an example one that we're going to make available on Canvas. It's a really basic one, so you don't take it as literal as that. You can make your timetable as complex as you like. You can use your own timetables if you've already got them. But what they need to clearly show is that you are teaching the subjects that you have that qualification to teach, and that the age range of the learners are there, and that it demonstrates that you're teaching a minimum of 4 hours a week. In fact, some of you may even need more than that because it doesn't include the holidays, which is bizarre because we all work in settings with school holidays. So I can't explain that one to you, I'm afraid. Okay, so let's move on. What are your next steps? So this is what I'm going to be asking you to do. By Sunday, the 9th of October, I would like you to upload to Canvas your teaching timetable, the narrative that you've just started, so that's questions one, two, and three, and your updated CV. Okay, and that's so that I can check it off and make sure that you are ready for the next checkpoint. Okay, in the meantime, I also want you to, as best you can, start creating a teaching log. You might want to use the one that you did for your DEP program in that template. You might have a teaching log you've created yourself. That's fine. At the moment, because the workbooks haven't become live, we don't have a template for the teaching log. Last year they didn't have one. They didn't mind which way you set it out. It might be that when the books come live, they've decided to create a teaching log template. Lots of people asked for a template last year, so it might be that they're going to do one this year. Generally, set are really good at providing templates for things, but the teaching log wasn't one of them last year. Lots of you have already decided on your mentor and supporter, so I just want to make sure that if you haven't already done that, you do need to get those details. And then obviously, as I said previously, look at the professional standards, really get a good understanding of them. What are they? What are they about? Angela. Yeah, so I've only asked you to look at question two, A, B, C. Ah, okay. Oh, yeah. So you're looking at the age range of your learners and the types of learners were separated. That's right. The subjects you teach and the main subject area. So B and C are the same in this question because A hasn't been split up. You're right. But it covers the same content. No, no, they're not really. No, no. So no, no, that's fine. That's good. So when we say basing your application on, in other words, what level three qualification do you have? That subject is the one that you're basing your application on. And you might have more than one subject, but I'm a maths teacher, for example, I'm basing this application on my maths teaching. And no, no, not at all. So what they're not interested in, and we d- we're all aware we teach things that we don't necessarily have the qualification for, but our schools are happy for us to teach. Set are not interested in that, so we won't be putting that in the application. Yeah, that's a good question, Angela. Thank you. Okay, so in addition to the work that I want you to submit to Canvas, I also want you to start creating a teaching log and making sure you've got your mentor details together. And then your workbook will come live usually on the 1st of October. As I say, I'm not 100% sure on the date this year, but once it becomes live, it will come live before we meet again. So it'll be an opportunity for you to go in and have a kind of look around. And last year, they had a section called Knowledge Base. That was a really useful place to go. In fact, I went there often to get the information that I would then relay back to um, my group, like you guys. Okay. It's almost like the Bible for completing your workbook. So if you've got a question and you're not really sure, have a look in the knowledge base section. That's really, really useful. But also, they've got in there a checklist of mandatory evidence. And again, that was really, really useful when you're thinking about, well, what can I submit as evidence? Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you to look at that all the time. I am going to make recommendations as well. But it's a good idea once your workbook comes live before we meet again, just to have a look at those sections. They might call them something else this year, I don't know, but hopefully it will be very, very similar. You will be able to complete a few of the sections, the About You section and your qualifications and your roles and responsibilities section. But what I don't want you to do is submit that to the checkpoint until you've had confirmation from me on Canvas that you can. So it will be a chance for me to have a look at your narrative and your qualifications and your CV and make sure all the evidence we've got in those sections is accurate and correct. And if I say, yes, you are ready for your checkpoint, then in your workbook, you can make sure everything's ready and submit at the checkpoint. Okay, so you can put everything in on your workbooks and get it ready, but don't submit to the checkpoint until I've given you the go ahead. Usually that's mid October. I think last year it was something like the 18th of October, the checkpoint deadline. So that means you have to get everything in those sections, the About You, qualifications, roles and responsibilities, uploaded and this checkpoint submitted by mid October. Okay, so there is a deadline for that. Selvin. Yes. Yeah, so in a moment, Selvin, yeah, that's a really good question. I'll run through kind of what the next steps will be, and one of those will be, you're right, a development plan. So we'll talk about that in just a moment, absolutely. Okay, so you can have a little look around your workbook. You can start completing some of the tasks of your workbook, but I want you to wait and hold off submitting at the checkpoint until I've given you the go ahead. And that's why the work that you're going to submit to Canvas is 1 week before your checkpoint deadline. And that means that I've got enough time then to have a look at it. In that time as well, I would like you to try and arrange for your first observation. Now, last year they said your first observation had to be between around the 4th of October, but no later than the 18th of November. So we've got plenty of time, but it's definitely worth trying to think about when to book it in. So it might be you need to sit down with your supporters and mentors and kind of book in a date, because I know how quickly, especially with some of us have 2-week half terms and things, that can creep up on us. So just start to think, from the 1st of October onwards, up until sort of mid-November, I need to have had my first observation. Good question, Selvin. So the observation template can be, and according to set last year, on anything. So your school might have an observation template. You can use the Teacher Training UK template if you wish, or your own. Then they weren't fussed last year what template you use for the observation feedback. However, you will be asked to complete a cover sheet for your observation that is to do with your workbook. That will be a template from set. I'll include it in the resources, and some of you might want to get on and get your observations done. Do not do them before the 1st of October, but after that, it's fine. There's a cover sheet in which you will just need to summarise the feedback. So it's a case of set probably won't really even look at the feedback observation form that you've had completed, but they'll look at the summary template form that's been completed on their paperwork. Okay. That's because often there's so many variety of different observation forms that for them it's probably a bit of a minefield to evaluate things. Whereas if you complete a cover sheet, everybody's cover sheet is the same, and therefore they can pick out information from that. But I'll include that in there. Go for it, Angela. Oh, sorry, Lee. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a section that says summarize the feedback from your observer. So you just read your report back and write some summary notes, and then there'll also be a section for you to write your own reflection on that observation, on that lesson. And so really then you can compare your thoughts to the observer's thoughts and see if they were similar or different. Angela. Yeah, pretty much. Absolutely. Okay, and then you may want to elaborate depending on how. I mean, if you use the Teacher Training UK one, we have lots of boxes, don't we, that you can tick, and sometimes the comment section was very, very brief. So you may then want to transfer some of the notes from the boxes across rather than keeping it brief, because there will be a word count for that. Yeah, if you would prefer and your school would prefer, then I think set are happy with that. That's what the kind of status was last year, that they don't require any specific template. So use your school's one if that's what you use. Yeah. And in fact, if you're used to using that one, it's going to be so much easier for you as well. Okay, so this will kind of help Selvin with your question. We will see each other again on the 17th of October, and that session will be about self-assessment. Okay. Oh, I've just got somebody's mic on. I'm not sure who's. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. So in that session, self-assessment. Okay, we will talk about how you look at your practice and decide on some of your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so this is why I keep encouraging you to look at the professional standards. You can also look at the self-assessment tool on set. It's there and available to you now on your dashboard. But what I don't want you to do is complete it. Have a look at it and go through it, but don't complete it because you'll be asked to complete it within your workbook. And unfortunately, you can't copy and paste it over. It won't let you do that. It's quite frustrating. But have a look. You can see the types of questions that will be on there. And it'll give you an idea of what the self-assessment section will be about. It is useful to have had your first observation when we do the self-assessment drop-in, but it's not essential. So if you haven't had your first observation by that date, don't panic. The self-assessment section is an opportunity for you to look at your own practice, but also for you to reflect on other people's opinion of your practice and then decide on some standards at which you might want to develop. So that session is just generally about self-assessment. But then we will go on and create a development plan, and that's what Selvin was talking about. So that gives us opportunity by November to have had our first observation, to have completed a self-assessment, and then we'll talk about how to create a development plan. And I'll give you templates and show you some examples because set are specific about the professional standards that you can choose. So you'll have to choose them from different areas. You'll have to choose them from knowledge and skills, planning and delivery, and then assessment as well. So we'll look at the different professional standard numbers and explain how you then create a development plan. And then obviously after that, really, it's about you actioning that plan. So the reason the next session after that is tutorials is because that will be the period in which you actually start to do all of those CPD activities. Okay, and you'll spend a few months, going to courses, doing online webinars, doing lots of reading before we come back together again and start to talk about how we write a critical reflection. Okay, this is the point at which we start to consider how that CPD that you've been doing has impacted your practice. And we talk about the sorts of evidence that you might need to submit to prove that you've had an impact or not. Okay. Any questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good question, Selvin. It's twofold. So, as part of your workbook, you'll have a section that shows the CPD log. Okay, so once you've created your development plan, you'll have a section called CPD log. That's where you will log all of your CPD. The CPD you log has to be in relation to the standards that you've chosen to develop. So it can't just be every staff meeting you go to because some of those won't have relevance to the development standards you've chosen. But if there are elements within that staff meeting, then fine. You do need to supply some evidence of CPD. So it could be a certificate of some CPD you've done. It could be even an invitation, a confirmation email, minutes from the meeting that you went to. That's all evidence that you've undertaken some CPD. And I'll talk about how to create that evidence and how to log it all as well. So don't worry. But in addition to that, you're right, Selvin. When you've then implemented some of that CPD into your practice, what you need to be able to do is evaluate whether that CPD was effective. Did it have an impact on your learners? Did it have an impact on your practice? Did it have an impact on your organisation, for example? And those are the three areas that that SET want to see evidence for in your workbook. So when you're looking, and this is quite far forward, Selvin, so I don't want to kind of overwhelm everybody, but when you are looking at what evidence would suggest that my CPD has had an impact, it might be that you did some CPD to try and enhance attendance, and then attendance data is sufficient. But it might be that you did something that there isn't particularly hard data to extract, and therefore a learner questionnaire do you feel that the tutor had sufficient subject knowledge? That is sufficient evidence. So we'll talk about the sorts of evidence for your CPD log, but also the type of evidence that you can produce for your impact. One of the pieces of evidence is actually your second observation. So you don't need to worry about that bit because your second observation will form part of that evidence. Does that help, Selvin? No, that's fine. Sorry, it will come back, I'm sure. Angela. No, it has to be post qualification. So anything from the 1st of October when your workbook becomes live, you really want to also undertake that CPD after you've created your development plan. Okay. Mhm. Absolutely. 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 So that's a very clever way of thinking about it, Selvin, because if you know potentially you've got some IT training coming up, maybe you've got new smart boards in your school, you know, you are going to potentially develop that area, and therefore you may want to pick, I think it's standard 15, that's to do with technology, because you know that's an area that needs developing, and you know that you're going to be doing CPD in the future. So you can make that part of your development plan. Absolutely. Anyone else? Lisa, go for it. Yes. So when we meet to talk about the creation of your development plans on the 21st of November, part of that session, I'll explain that you will also need to have a professional discussion with your mentor. There's a template for that, and I can include it in the resources as well. But you won't need to do that yet because you need to have your development plan ready to take to your mentor and say, this is the sort of thing that I want to do because I want to develop these standards. And then you and your mentor will sit down and have a discussion and you record the conversation in brief note form. Don't expect it to be a huge, lengthy document, but it's just a chance for you and your mentor, and if your line manager wants to get involved or whoever the team want to get involved, that's you can add that and say there were other people within your professional discussion who suggested this or recommended I did this, and yeah, it's a document then that is submitted to your workbook again as evidence that you've discussed your development plan with your mentor. That's right. Anyone else? Good. Okay, so I think that is us done. As I said, the homework, well, I'll just quickly go back to that just so that you've got a reminder. Uploading to Canvas by the 9th of October is your teaching timetable, the narrative, questions 1, 2, and 3, and your CV. I can then check that ready for your checkpoint, and that's when your workbook becomes live mid-October time. In the meantime, before that happens, you can also create a teaching log and start to get a good understanding of the professional standards. Selvin. It's been a long time. Yeah, no, go for it. No, don't worry, Selvin. Tell you what, I will say if anyone's got any other questions. Got it? Got it? Go for it. Mhm. Yep. Yeah, don't worry. That's because it would have been an invoiced payment from Teacher Training UK, and I'm not sure how quickly they log that on your. I would have thought so. What usually happens, what happened last year and the year before, is that you get an email from SET confirmation that your workbook will become live, and that's your confirmation that you're paid and ready to go. So when your workbook becomes live, basically you last year you sign into your dashboard as usual, and at the very top there's a button that says My QTLS. I'm hoping that that's the same this year because it's really then quite clear where you go to get your workbook. But they will put it all in an email for you, so you'll know exactly what to do. That's Yep. No, don't worry, Sylvian. Just make sure you upload the correct one to your workbook. Yeah, that's it. Okay. If you've got any questions, you want to hang around at the end, let me know. Otherwise, you're welcome to go, and I will look forward to seeing your work on Canvas. And obviously, email me if you've got any questions in the meantime. Of course, it is, no problem. Take care. See you later. Take care. See you soon.